The Chinese room problem has long been a subject of debate and discussion in the fields of philosophy and artificial intelligence. First presented by philosopher John Searle in 1980, the Chinese room argument challenges the idea that machines can ever truly be intelligent by proposing a thought experiment in which a person who does not understand Chinese is able to simulate understanding by following a set of rules. One interesting tidbit is the origin of the name Chinese room. As Searle himself has explained, he chose this name because he wanted to avoid any preconceptions or associations that might come with more familiar terms. As he put it in a 2010 interview with the New York Times, "I wanted a name that would be kind of neutral and not have any pre-existing philosophical or scientific associations. So I just picked Chinese because it was a country that I knew a little bit about, but not a lot." Of course, this choice has not prevented many people from reading all sorts of cultural and political meanings into the name, but it's interesting to note that for Searle, it was simply a matter of convenience. At its core, the Chinese room argument raises fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness, intelligence, and understanding. What does it mean to understand something? Can a system that follows rules without truly comprehending their meaning be considered intelligent? And what are the implications of these questions for the field of artificial intelligence? To fully understand the Chinese room problem and its relevance to the recent debate about AI, we must first examine its premises and assumptions, as well as its criticisms and limitations. The Chinese room argument begins with a thought experiment in which a person who does not understand Chinese is placed inside a room. The person is given a set of symbols and rules for manipulating them, and is then asked to translate Chinese sentences into English. The person is able to follow the rules and produce correct translations, even though they do not understand the meaning of the Chinese sentences. Searle argues that this demonstrates that understanding is more than just following a set of rules. He claims that the person in the room is merely carrying out a set of syntactical operations without truly comprehending the meaning of the symbols they are manipulating. Therefore, he concludes that machines that operate purely on the basis of syntax, such as computers, can never truly understand anything. Searle, 1999, summarized his Chinese room argument concisely. Imagine a native English speaker who knows no Chinese locked in a room full of boxes of Chinese symbols, a database, together with a book of instructions for manipulating the symbols, the program. Imagine that people outside the room send in other Chinese symbols which, unknown to the person in the room, are questions in Chinese, the input. And imagine that by following the instructions in the program, the man in the room is able to pass out Chinese symbols which are correct answers to the questions, the output. The program enables the person in the room to pass the Turing test for understanding Chinese, but he does not understand a word of Chinese. Searle goes on to say, the point of the argument is this. If the man in the room does not understand Chinese on the basis of implementing the appropriate program for understanding Chinese, then neither does any other digital computer solely on that basis, because no computer, qua computer, has anything the man does not have. Searle's argument challenges the idea that programming a computer can result in true understanding. He argues that computers lack the ability to comprehend meaning or semantics and merely use syntactic rules to manipulate symbol. This leads to the broader conclusion that the theory of human minds as computer-like computational systems is flawed, and that minds must result from biological processes. These ideas have wide-ranging implications for philosophy of language and mind, theories of consciousness, computer science, and cognitive science. As a result, the argument has sparked many critical responses. Critics of the Chinese room argument have pointed out that it relies on a number of assumptions that may not be valid. For example, the argument assumes that understanding language requires some kind of subjective experience or consciousness. However, some philosophers and AI researchers have suggested that it may be possible to create machines that are capable of processing and generating language without having subjective experiences. Another assumption of the Chinese room argument is that the person in the room is only following a set of rules. However, some critics have argued that the person in the room is actually engaging in a form of interpretation by selecting the appropriate rules to apply based on the context of the Chinese sentences. This interpretation, they argue, is a form of understanding, even if it is not conscious or subjective. In addition, since the argument was conceived in the very early days of AIE research, it relies on a narrow and outdated view of what machines can and cannot do. As AI technology has advanced, researchers have developed new methods for creating machines that can learn, adapt, and process information in ways that were once thought to be exclusively human. For example, machine learning algorithms are able to learn and improve their performance over time by analyzing large amounts of data and identifying patterns and relationships. These algorithms are able to perform complex tasks such as recognizing images and speech without relying on explicit rules or pre-programmed instruction. This suggests that it may be possible to create machines that can exhibit genuine intelligence and understanding, even if they do not work in exactly the same way as human brains. A final objection to Searle's argument is that it assumes a strict division between syntax and semantics and does not accurately reflect the way that humans use language. At first glance, this objection may seem to challenge Searle's argument. After all, Searle did argue that computers do not have the ability to understand meaning the same way humans can. However, the objection goes further than that. It argues that meaning cannot be reduced to mere syntactic manipulation of symbols, and that context, personal experience, and cultural knowledge are also necessary for understanding language. This objection challenges Searle's argument by pointing out that he oversimplifies the process of understanding language. Searle's thought experiment relies on the assumption that language can be reduced to a set of symbols and rules that can be manipulated according to certain syntax. However, this assumption is too simplistic, as language is not a static and objective construct that can be manipulated in this way. Language is instead a dynamic and complex process that is shaped by many factors, including context, personal experience, and cultural knowledge. These factors all play a role in shaping the meaning of words and phrases and cannot be reduced to a mere manipulation of symbol. This means that Searle's thought experiment does not accurately represent the way that humans use language, and therefore cannot be used to draw conclusions about the limitations of machine. To put it simply, Searle assumes that humans understand language in a way that machines could not, but this assumption is flawed because humans themselves do not understand language in the way that Searle suggests. Instead, humans understand language through a combination of factors, including context, personal experience, and cultural knowledge that cannot be reduced to a set of rules and symbols. It is worth noting that Searle did not originally intend the Chinese room to be a standalone argument against artificial intelligence. Rather, as he has explained in various interviews and articles over the years, the Chinese room was just one example he used in a broader argument against functionalism. The idea that mental states and processes can be defined purely in terms of their functional roles rather than their physical properties. Searle's argument was that functionalism could not provide a complete account of human cognition because it failed to account for the subjective, qualitative aspects of conscious experience. The Chinese room was meant to illustrate this point by showing that a system could carry out complex cognitive tasks without actually understanding what it was doing. However, the Chinese room quickly took on a life of its own, as many philosophers and AI researchers saw it as a direct challenge to the idea that machines could ever be truly intelligent. The argument spawned a number of public debates, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s, when the field of AI was rapidly advancing and many researchers were optimistic about the possibility of creating machines that could match or exceed human intelligence. One notable debate occurred in 1988 when Searle squared off against AI researcher Marvin Minsky in a public forum at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The debate which was moderated by philosopher Daniel Dennett, pitted Searle's arguments against Minsky's belief in the possibility of creating conscious machines. The two men presented their views and responded to each other's objections for several hours, with neither side apparently swaying the other. The debate was later published as a book, The Mind's Eye, Fantasies and Reflections on Self and Soul, and remains a classic example of the clash between traditional philosophical views and cutting-edge technological developments.